World leaders have been reacting to Donald Trump's sweep of tariffs, which have left global stock markets in turmoil. The US president has announced a 20% tariff on all EU imports into America. The European Commission president said the world economy would suffer massively. The Taoiseach said it would trigger uncertainty and put jobs at risk. But Micheál Martin has insisted that Ireland will weather this storm.
Stock markets, the US dollar and American bonds have tumbled following President Donald Trump's announcement on tariffs. In other words, investors don't like it one bit. Last night, in a freewheeling address, he hit major trading partners with wide-ranging duties on exports to the US.
European Union, they're very tough, very, very tough traders. You think of the European Union, very friendly. They rip us off. It's so sad to see. It's so pathetic.
Ireland, as part of the EU, will face 20% tariffs on most exports to the US. Donald Trump erroneously claimed that's because Europe charged 39% on imports from America.
I watched him as he waved the US Trade Estimates report, a US document that clearly sets out that the average EU tariff is 5% on US goods. But fact and reality took a back seat last night when he went on to claim that the EU imposes tariffs of 39%.
One of the products excluded are pharmaceuticals, but there is an expectation they could be hit in a future announcement. Now the focus switches from Washington's tariffs to the EU's response.
The global economy will massively suffer. Uncertainty will spiral and trigger the rise of further protectionism. The consequences will be dire for millions of people around the globe.
Some countries, including France, advocate tough measures against US online platforms operating in the EU. That would potentially damage Ireland's tech sector. Anything drastic will be resisted by the government here.
It is important that our response is considered and measured. Any action should be proportionate, aimed at defending the interests of our businesses, workers and citizens.
Ireland is appealing for cool heads. The question is whether it will be listened to.
Well, let's speak now to our Washington correspondent, Sean Whelan, and our Europe editor, Tony Connolly. Tony, to you first. Lots of talk of cool heads and negotiation. That's probably a best-case scenario, but the EU is considering other options.
That's right, Sharon. Officials are saying they're analysing the whole battery of tariffs from last night, and I think that reflects some of the unease in member states about trying to have a measured response. Officials have been parsing the impact of these tariffs. They're saying that they will hit €380 billion in European exports to the United States. That's 70% of all exports. They also noted, interestingly, that before the announcement last night, the US collected about €7 billion annually on tariffs on goods coming in from the European Union. That's going to rise to €81 billion. That's a huge jump. Now, what officials have been saying today is, look, if Donald Trump wants to talk about reciprocity, that's fine. We can talk about that. The EU's preference is that reciprocal tariffs are negotiated down to zero rather than those tariffs being increased. They said that, in fact, 70% of the exports coming into the European Union have a zero tariff. Now, that's no matter whether there's a free trade agreement with some of the 76 partners around the world the EU has a free trade agreement with, or just under basic WTO terms. So they're saying, look, the EU is by far from being unfair in its treatment of trading partners around the world. There is a hope that they can get into some kind of negotiation. But that said, they are threatening tariffs that will really hit the US where it will hurt, according to officials. And anything could be included in this. Nothing's off the table. So that could include intellectual property, services, big tech, Wall Street banks and public procurement.
So, Sean, is this President Trump's opening gambit? Is he actually open for negotiations?
Well, right now he's not. He's gone off to Florida to watch some golf. But his Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, has been doing the media rounds over here last night and a lot this morning. Very bullish character, as you'd expect from a market sky. But he is in no mood for negotiations. He said, forget about negotiations. That's just talk. We want to see action. And by action, he means opening up markets to American goods without all these trade barriers that they complain about. It's not so much the tariffs that they're bothered about. As Tony was saying, the tariff rate in Europe is very low. It's other stuff that they don't like. For example, we don't take chicken, apparently, from America because they wash it in chlorine over here as a health control measure. People are opposed to that. He said, you don't take our beef because American beef is apparently much nicer than European beef. European beef, he said, is weak. Whatever that means. We in Europe ban American beef if it's been treated with hormones, but allow in beef that has not been treated with hormones. So there's all kinds of trade barriers that are up for discussion. But basically, they want the Europeans to lie down and let the Americans pretty much do whatever they want, according to Mr. Lutnick. No mood for negotiations here. In response, there's been a market bloodbath. As you can see, every time taxes go up and tariffs are a tax, stock prices fall. This is the biggest tax rise in modern times in America, and that's why you're seeing these huge falls. It's just like being 15 years ago during the financial crisis, a wall of red. Sharon?
Washington correspondent Sean Whelan and Europe editor Tony Connolly, thank you both for that analysis.
Well, for more analysis, we're joined in studio by our Economics and Public Affairs editor, David Murphy, and from Leinster House by political correspondent Paul Cunningham. David, to you first. Lots of ramifications from all this, including a return of our old friend from Brexit days, the trade implications of the border.
That's right. So what's happened now is, as a result of this decision, the north of Ireland and Britain will have a tariff rate of 10%. So in other words, if a product is sent from the north of Ireland to the US, there will be a tariff of 10% on that. If it comes from the Republic of Ireland and goes to the US, there will be a tariff of 20%. Now, obviously, in that situation, Northern Ireland has a slight advantage. However, there are some complications with this. If, for example, there's a cheesemaker based in Newry which is buying milk from Monaghan, what rate is going to be charged on their cheese? There's no clarity about that, and there's only a few days before these tariffs take effect. It'll be up to the United States to decide how all of that is going to work. But suddenly, after years of negotiating free trade between the Republic and the North during the Brexit negotiations, Donald Trump has changed all that with simply signing one document.
OK. And Paul Cunningham, a bit of uncharacteristic unity in Leinster House today in response to President Trump's announcement. Is that going to last?
I think the chances of it lasting are nil. Our whole economic model is up in the air, and that probably means some difficult decisions, which inevitably will be divisive. There was a straw in the wind today, David. Labour's Duncan Smith saying he felt that we should already be getting into offering supports to businesses who are going to be hit by tariffs so that workers can be kept at work. However, the Taoiseach Simon Harris saying that he didn't believe that's the priority. The number one priority is to try and get those tariffs of 20% down. That will do more. And you just get the sense that we're beginning to go there. What happens if these talks between the European countries trying to negotiate with the US, as Sean Whelan indicated, don't go anywhere, and then we do get into the area of reciprocal tariffs, and it is difficult for Ireland? Well, then the opposition parties are going to be gunning for the government, saying you haven't protected our national interest. All of the weight, all of the stress is going to be on Micheál Martin. The Taoiseach will be in with the other 26 EU leaders trying to work out that strategy. We've also got a budget coming up in October. What happens if we do begin to get a slide in employment numbers? What happens if the corporate tax receipts begin to dry up? Again, difficult decisions, and that means it's going to be politically tough. The Finance Minister has been speaking in the past few minutes. He said that when it came to unemployment, he thinks it's more of a medium-term risk. He said when it comes to tax receipts, he thinks they will be remain steady. He doesn't need to revise it. But Sinn Féin is saying, look, what's going to happen to that all-Ireland economy? You just heard David talking about the stresses there. It wants to know what the government's decision is. Already you can see things being frayed. It is true to say that there has been a green jumper put on by the government and by the opposition. They're both saying the same things, but I just think we're going to get to a pinch point pretty quickly, and then it's going to be divisive.
OK, Paul Cunningham and David Murphy, thanks indeed for that.